There is a question that most financial content refuses to ask, not because the answer is complicated, but because the answer is uncomfortable. Why does more money not fix the problem? In 2003, heavyweight champion Mike Tyson filed for bankruptcy. At the peak of his career, he had generated over $300 million in earnings. He filed with $30 million in debt. $300 million entered his life, and it was not enough. You might think that is an extreme case. A celebrity problem, not your problem. But consider this. According to a 2025 Lend.edu survey, 53% of Americans say they are living paycheck to paycheck right now. And before you assume that is a low-income statistic, read further. 20% of households earning $150,000 or more per year say they are stuck in the same cycle. According to payment's intelligence, roughly half of high earners, those making $100,000 or more, report living paycheck to paycheck as of January 2025. Half. The number on the paycheck is not the problem. Something else is happening. Something that school never covered, that most financial content dances around, and that most of us do not discover until we have been running the same loop for years, earning and spending, with nothing to show for it. Today we are going to name it, we are going to understand it, and then we are going to build a better framework for how to actually think about money, not just how to earn it. My name is Nick, this is Wealth Loom, this is entertainment and education, not financial advice. Let us get into it. Part 1. What money actually is, and why the definition matters. Before we can solve a problem, we need to understand what we are actually dealing with. Most people define money as currency, something you earn, something you spend, something the government prints, a practical thing, a means to an end. But I want to offer a different definition, one that changes how you interact with money the moment you accept it. Money is stored value. When you receive your paycheck, what you are really receiving is a representation of the value you produced. You spent 40 hours of your life, your knowledge, your skills, your attention, and the market assigned a dollar amount to that. You are not holding paper. You are holding compressed versions of your time, your effort, your capability. When you hand over money to make a purchase, you are making a trade. You are exchanging a portion of your stored time and energy for something you believe is worth an equivalent amount of yours. Why does this reframe matter? Because it immediately changes the question from how much do I earn to what am I trading my time for? Every purchase you make with money is ultimately a purchase made with a portion of your life. The $60 dinner, the $500 weekend, the $1,000 handbag. Those are not just numbers. Those are hours of a life that cannot be recovered. This is not a sermon against spending. Spending on things that genuinely matter to you is exactly what money is for. The point is simply this. When you see money as stored time rather than just currency, you stop spending unconsciously and start making deliberate trades. Most people do not do this. Most people experience money as something abstract that flows in one direction and out the other without any particular logic to its disappearance. And that abstraction is the first layer of the trap. Part 2. The consumption problem. Why earning more does not automatically help. Here is the honest core of the problem that most personal finance content refuses to say plainly. For most people, the gap between what they earn and what they keep is not a production problem, it is a consumption problem. Think about the trajectory of the average person's financial life. They start out in college or their early 20s with very little. They are resourceful, they share apartments, cook at home, look for deals, find creative ways to stretch thin resources, and they are mostly fine. Then they get a better job, the salary goes up, and slowly, quietly, something changes. The one-bedroom apartment becomes a two-bedroom, the used car becomes a new one, the home-cooked dinners become restaurant dinners, the budget airline tickets become the seat with a bit more legroom. None of these upgrades are wrong. Each one individually feels completely reasonable. Each one is a reward for working hard, for earning more, for succeeding. The trap is not in any single upgrade. The trap is in the cumulative effect of all of them together, combined with the psychological mechanism that drives them. That mechanism has a name. Economists and behavioral psychologists call it hedonic adaptation, sometimes called the hedonic treadmill. Here is how it works. When you experience something positive, a nicer car, a bigger home, a better wardrobe, your brain registers a spike of pleasure. You are genuinely happier for a moment. But human beings are extraordinarily good at adapting to new circumstances. Within weeks or months, that newer car becomes the baseline. The bigger apartment becomes normal. The pleasure fades, and your brain begins scanning for the next thing that might restore that feeling of improvement. This is not a character flaw, it is neuroscience. Your brain is designed to normalize the present and seek future improvement. The hedonic treadmill runs whether you are aware of it or not. But here is what makes it financially devastating. As your income grows, your lifestyle upgrades to match it. And then your new lifestyle requires your new income just to sustain it. The gap between what comes in and what stays never widens. Instead, expenses expand to fill the available space. This is what is commonly called lifestyle inflation, and it is the primary reason that millions of people earning double or triple the average wage still find themselves financially vulnerable. That vulnerable feeling does not go away when you earn more. It only recedes if the spending pattern changes. Part 3. The Joneses are on your phone now. In the original version of the phrase, keeping up with the Joneses meant trying to match the lifestyle of your immediate neighbors, the people on your block, the families you saw at school events, the social circle you physically inhabited. That social comparison had natural limits. You could only see so many people's lives. The reference group was small. Today, the Joneses are not your neighbors. They are every person you follow on a screen that is in your pocket 24 hours a day. They are influencers whose entire business model depends on displaying the highest possible version of a lifestyle. They are friends posting the best version of their weekend. They are strangers on social media whose carefully curated lives bear almost no resemblance to their actual financial reality. Nearly 40% of young adults in a Credit Karma survey said they spend more money on experiences than necessities, partly because they want to share those experiences on social media, not because they wanted the experience for its own sake, but because they wanted to produce content that signals a certain kind of life. The comparison pool has expanded from a few dozen people to millions, and the comparison has become constant, not occasional, not weekly, but every time you open an app, which for most people is dozens of times per day. This is not a moral argument about social media. It is a financial argument about what social comparison does to your spending behavior. When your reference group is global, infinite, and algorithmically optimized to show you the most aspirational content possible, the psychological pressure to upgrade your lifestyle is not occasional. It is relentless, and most of us are experiencing it without ever consciously recognizing it as a financial force acting on our behavior. Part 4. The numbers behind the trap. Let me show you what this actually looks like in the data, because the abstract becomes much clearer when it has specific numbers attached. The median emergency savings balance for Americans right now, according to a 2025 Empower research study, is $500. $500, not $5,000, not 1 month of expenses, $500. That is the midpoint, meaning half of Americans have less than $500 set aside for the unexpected. 32% have no emergency savings at all, according to the same study. The Federal Reserve's 2024 survey of household economics found that 30% of adults could not cover 3 months of expenses by any means. Not savings, not borrowing, not selling assets, nothing. The Bureau of Economic Analysis reports the personal savings rate in the United States for 2025 at approximately 4.9% of disposable income. That means out of every dollar that comes in after taxes, less than 5 cents is being kept. Now here's the part that should stop you cold. According to the same Federal Reserve data, 55% of adults do have 3 months of emergency savings, which means 45% of the country is one serious emergency: a job loss, a medical bill, a car failure, away from genuine financial crisis. And remember, this is not a poverty problem. This is an income problem. The spending pattern that creates this vulnerability exists at every income level because lifestyle inflation follows income upward. The $500 emergency fund belongs to people earning $30,000 per year and people earning $100,000 per year alike. The trap does not discriminate by income. It discriminates by awareness. Part 5. The invisible cost. What financial vulnerability actually does to you here is something that financial content rarely covers because it is not directly about money. Living on a financial edge does not just affect your bank account, it affects your thinking. When you are one paycheck away from missing rent, your brain does not operate in the same mode as someone who has 6 months of expenses saved. Research in behavioral economics shows that financial scarcity activates a kind of cognitive tunnel vision, a narrowing of focus onto the immediate problem that makes it harder to think clearly about longer-term decisions. You become reactive rather than strategic. You make choices based on this week, not this year. The job that pays more but requires you to move becomes too risky when you have nothing to fall back on. The negotiation where you need to be willing to walk away becomes impossible when walking away means not eating. The investment that requires patience becomes inaccessible when you need the money right now. Financial vulnerability does not just take money from you. It takes options, and options are what allow you to make better decisions, take better risks, and build towards something better. This is the least discussed cost of living on the financial edge, not the overdraft fees, not the high-interest debt. The cost of the decisions you cannot make because your position requires you to say yes when you should say no, and no when you should say yes. The emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of expenses kept in a liquid account, is not a nice to have. It is the foundation of your ability to think clearly and act strategically. It is the difference between having options and not having them. Part 6. The production side. But wait, there is more to the story. Here is where I want to be careful and honest, because most personal finance content stops at the consumption conversation and never gets to the other half. Living below your means is necessary. Tracking your spending is necessary. Building an emergency fund is necessary. These are foundational and non-negotiable, but they are not sufficient. There is a ceiling to how much you can reduce. You cannot cut your way to wealth. You can reduce expenses all the way down to the minimum cost of living, and what you have is a very efficient poverty. The consumption side of the equation has a floor. The production side has no ceiling. Production, the value you create and put into the world, is the other variable in the equation. And unlike consumption, it is not just about your salary. Your salary is one output channel for your labor. It is the most common one and the most accessible one, and for most people, it is where all their energy goes. Work hard, get raises, climb the ladder. This is a legitimate path. There is nothing wrong with it. But it is worth understanding that your salary is the amount someone else has determined your time is worth in the context of their business. It reflects the floor they need to pay to retain you, not the ceiling of what your skills and time can generate when pointed in a different direction. The internet has fundamentally changed this equation. The person who has genuine knowledge, a genuine skill, or a genuine perspective can now reach the global market directly. They do not need a middleman. They do not need permission. They need a camera, a skill, and the willingness to put something out that the market might find valuable. This is why you see people building content channels, online courses, consulting practices, and software products alongside their day jobs, not to escape work, but to add an additional output channel for the value they already have. The question is not whether you should quit your job. The question is whether the value you produce has only one outlet. Most people have more production capacity than they have outlets. Part 7. The actual framework. 2 variables, 1 equation. Let me bring this all together into the simplest framework in personal finance, because I think the simplicity is exactly what gets missed. Your financial position at any moment is the result of one equation: what you produce minus what you consume. That is it. Production minus consumption. The difference between those two numbers, compounded over time and put to work in assets that generate returns, is what wealth is. Everything else, every specific strategy, every specific product, every specific investment vehicle, is just a tactic inside one of those 2 variables. On the consumption side, the goal is awareness, then intention. Awareness means knowing what is actually going out and why. Intention means deciding in advance what you are willing to trade your stored time for, and sticking to that decision rather than letting the hedonic treadmill and social comparison make the decisions for you. The practical starting point is a simple monthly accounting of where money goes. Not to judge it, not to punish yourself for every coffee purchase, but to see clearly what the pattern actually is, because most people are genuinely surprised by the gap between what they thought they spent and what they actually spent. The Federal Reserve's research notes the ostrich effect, our tendency to avoid looking at negative financial information, the discomfort of looking at the bank account after a rough month, the reluctance to add up the monthly subscriptions. Awareness is the first step, and it is the step most people skip. Once you see the pattern clearly, you can make deliberate choices about it. Which of these expenses is genuinely making my life better? Which of these is the hedonic treadmill running in the background, buying things that feel like upgrades but return me to the same baseline of happiness within a month? On the production side, the question is, what is the highest value use of your skills, your time, and your knowledge? For most people right now, the answer is still a job, and a good job at that. But the question worth asking is whether there is an additional output channel available to you. Something you know, something you can teach, something you can build, something you can create, that the market might be willing to pay for. Production is not about working more hours, it is about finding more leverage for the hours you already have. Closing. Here's what I want you to walk away with. The money trap is not a trap of not earning enough. It is a trap of not understanding the relationship between what comes in and what stays, and the psychological forces that widen the gap without your conscious permission. The hedonic treadmill is real, and it is running right now. The social comparison mechanism is real, and it has been turbocharged by technology. The tendency to spend more as we earn more is not weakness. It is human nature operating exactly as designed. But human nature can be redirected with awareness. And the financial edge that most people live on, that narrow margin where one emergency becomes a genuine crisis, is not fixed. It can be widened deliberately over time through the accumulation of tiny decisions made with clear eyes rather than reactive ones. The median American household has $8,000 in their bank account. The median emergency savings balance is $500. The personal savings rate is under 5%. These numbers are not destiny. They are a description of what happens when people operate inside the trap without ever being shown it exists. Now you have seen it. Production minus consumption. Decide what your time is worth and stop trading it for the hedonic treadmill. Build the safety net that gives you options. Then ask yourself what the highest value use of your production capacity actually is. That is the framework. It is not complicated. But it is the thing school did not teach you, financial media does not often cover, and most people discover far too late. If this changed how you think about your relationship with money, share it with someone who needs to hear it. The person spending their raise before it arrives, the person checking their net worth against their Instagram feed, the person who has never once written down where their money actually goes. Subscribe because there is more math to run, the kind that actually changes how you think. This is entertainment and education, not financial advice.